Good evening. Welcome to the March 1st, 2022 meeting with the Downers Grove Village Council. It's great to see everyone's smiles here tonight. As usual, we begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Culvaney,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here.
Great to see everybody tonight. Is there a motion concerning previous minutes?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the February 15th, 2022 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Just like that, we're on to item 4 on our agenda tonight. This is the public comments portion of the meeting. Before we continue, a few guidelines. Please remember the public comments portion of these meetings, both on agenda items and a little bit later on non-agenda items, is an opportunity for the public to address the council. While we try to be accommodating, this is not an open question and answer session. We have a variety of opportunities to ask questions and engage council members. Our e-remarks system, the CRC system, Coffee with the Council, which hopefully will be coming back soon, direct email or by phone. And I'm certain, as I've said before, that I know members up here have spent many hours with residents individually, one-on-one as well. But the public comments agenda item and the public comments portion are each specific agenda items in a structured meeting. As such, we do have some expectations in how they'll be handled. Please state your name for the record. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Please avoid repeating what others have already said. Please keep your comments to one visit to the podium per subject. If you forget to mention something or additional conversation brings up a new idea, please hold that until after the meeting and use one of the other contact methods, email, CRC, or a phone call, to contact us as needed, or bring that new comment to our next meeting. So is there anyone here who has comments on subjects not on tonight's agenda?
Is this what we all look like? It's been a while since I've seen your faces. I want to start out tonight because I'm sure it's going to go back and forth with some other heated topics, or maybe not so. We talked about a resident that was in the Super Bowl, so I thought this was fair game just to talk about our Olympics that we just had. I think we all can agree it's fun to have the athletes put aside today's gripe or mask versus not mask, the pandemic stuff, and now the tragedy happening with Russia and Ukraine. We have a Special Olympics, or Paralympics, rather, coming up this weekend. And too many times people forget about that. People are always putting all their eggs in the regular classic Olympics. But similar to colleges with 95% of revenues and viewership spent on basketball and football, you forget about like lacrosse and soccer and track and some other stuff. So I want us to really take a good look at the Paralympics this weekend. Bob, you and I are tied to Allie Johnson. Mm-hmm. She is the niece of, she's an Amon family. Laura Amon, I think Gretchen Amon was in your class. Rob Amon was in my class. She's a Western Springs native, but there are tons of people in Downers Grove that are our age, that are friends with the parents, and even more kids that were friends with Allie and still are friends with Allie through church youth groups and that kind of stuff. So if you're couch potato this weekend, instead of binge watching your favorite Netflix thing, maybe tune into their stories, because it's amazing what these kids have done. It's just amazing for regular classic Olympians to be able to make it to that level, but even more so for these other, Paralympic kids that have got other things going on beyond just being, superior athletes. So take a look at that if you can. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
My name is Marshall Schmidt. 2 weeks ago in this hallowed hall, a member of this distinguished body launched an ad hominem attack and accused me of misleading the public and my client. Knowing that I would be unable to respond in this forum for at least 2 weeks, and then only for 5 minutes. Although initially outraged over this abuse of power and position, I realized quickly that the attack arose because the evidence and arguments presented by the many citizens over the last several weeks, including myself, rang true, making the member uncomfortable. But he and I do agree that the public should never be misled. Accordingly, over the next several weeks and months, I will take my 5 minutes and address point by point the reasons the council gave for amending the nonconformity section of the zoning ordinance and why those reasons cannot withstand scrutiny. But in the end, it will be for the public to decide who is misleading whom. Let's begin with the language of the original ordinance before the amendment. In relevant part, section 28.11020B read, "A non-conforming lot in an R district may be used as a building site for a single detached home or accessory structure, subject to compliance with applicable lot and building regulations other than those pertaining to the lot area and lot width, except that when two lots, two or more contiguous non-conforming lots, are held in common ownership, the lots must be consolidated in order to meet or come closer to meeting applicable minimum lot area and lot width requirements." Nowhere in this language is there any mention of building across a lot line. Nothing about this language indicates that consolidation is limited to that situation. That is because another section of the ordinance, section 28.1.080, states, quote, "Lots improved with a structure may not be divided into two or more lots," meaning if you're across a lot line, you have to consolidate lots. This means that when you build across lot lines, you always must consolidate whether there is a lot width or depth issue. The conclusion of tonight's lesson is simple. In 2014, the Village Council drafted two very straightforward provisions to cover two sometimes overlapping situations. One where a building spanned two lots, section 28.1.080, and one where a non-conforming lot met all other building requirements except lot width and lot depth, and lots next to each other were owned by the same party, and that's section 28.11.020B. The language used for each provision is simple and speaks for itself. The Village Council knew how to draft ordinances. It did not draft two provisions to cover the same issue. If the Village Council intended to draft 28.11.020 to mean that lots were to be consolidated only when crossing a lot line, as several on this council have so vehemently alleged, the previous council did a comically bad job. No one has explained how the language can be interpreted to read like the ordinance as amended. When the amendment was adopted on February 15, not a single commissioner articulated how anyone could interpret the section to apply only when a lot line was crossed. That is because the language does not and was never intended to mean that. Next time we will talk about the history of this provision and how, contrary to the statements made 2 weeks ago, the amendment to the nonconformity section did not change property rights to encourage consolidation in 2014, which is exactly how the Village Council described the provision at the time. The legislative history is clear. It changed rights, and it was done to consolidate or to encourage consolidation when two non-conforming lots were conjoined. Thank you very much.
Hi. James Kelly. Oh, cool. I have an address now. My business address and strategy room for my non-for-profit is 5312 Main Street. Awesome old building, but needs a little work. But in the meantime, I've been talking to some merchants in the area, and the one lady that I was majorly impressed with is been a long day. Cozy Corner Hot Dogs and Beef. She's been in the area for 30 years. And I think that's awesome. And we're going to be doing our first fundraiser involving her restaurant. And starting tomorrow, we're starting a campaign called Loving Downers Grove. In the meantime, since there's no coffee with the mayor, I decided to buy the city council lunch. I'm working with Mr. Baker. He's supposed to give me some information. I have a nice parking lot. I have some balloon people. We're going to put Celebrating Downers Grove. I kind of borrowed it a little bit from Mary Jo of Berwyn. He used to have a campaign called I Love Berwyn. It's like, nah, I love Loving Downers Grove a little bit better because we are all here and I'm here to stay and it's a wonderful town. Have a nice evening. Enjoy the lunch. They got daily special that blow your mind. French fries are awesome.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone else? Subjects not on tonight's agenda?
David Rose. Well, the fundamental question underlying the non-conforming lot text clarification on which council voted on the 15th was always, can a rigged process produce an unrigged result? Having seen council in action, I always had my doubts. Nevertheless, one hopes until hope is dashed. What transpired on the 15th, however, surpassed even my low expectations. Students of local government should study what transpired on that date and the events leading up to it as a textbook example of political ass covering. It's a marvelous example of that old adage, small minds think alike and then circle the wagons. As I feared, it confirmed 4 core problems with council. 1, it uses language loosely at best and incorrectly and deceptively at worst. 2, it makes decisions devoid of logic, data, and sound critical thinking, as Mr. Schmidt is about to demonstrate to us. It fails to do its job, 3, because its entire business model is predicated on worship of economic growth and rising EAV, no matter the hidden costs foisted onto residents and indirectly onto non-residents. And 4, its tendency, as was true with DG 58, is to act autocratically, feigning to be democratic. I've been dismayed for years that council's purported goal of environmental sustainability exemplify these defects, but then I finally realized they're systemic. Council doesn't explore options. It takes a position and then throws out a spaghetti of explanations and justifications, presuming some will stick. Council claims its actions are coincidental and unrelated to Longfellow. It claims it's simply trying to clarify language so that the language matches both the intent of the ordinance writer and its implementation. The intent claim is interesting in that it reminds me of a comedy bit Stephen Colbert does on his late-night TV show. As part of a quiz, Colbert asks his celebrity guest to guess what number he's thinking of. The celebrity always guesses wrong, of course, for the obvious reason. The parallel is that a reader of the ordinance in question is supposed to understand it not as it is written on the page in its plain English, but as the council intended. I'll dispense with taking further time on that point other than to say the following. If the language makes no difference, why bother changing it? Why go through the formal process? Indeed, why have not 1 but 2 plan commission meetings before council was free to do as it did and ignore or adulterate the Plan Commission's meeting 2 recommendation to reject 0 to 7. How does council justify going against the Plan Commission? Because our esteemed mayor and the mayor in waiting assert they know what the intention was because they were there when it was agreed to. They proclaim the intention has always been the intention, even though the ordinance never expressed it. Given their track record on other matters, degree of confidence in the accuracy of their claim in this instance is at best 50-50. Staff and council further claim implementation of the ordinance these past many years has been consistent not with the language but with its mystical intention. So do we have proof of this claim? The village's award-winning staff never provided the full set of data to the Plan Commission and made it available for residents seeking to verify the veracity of the claim only days before the meeting. According to public comment by both Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Mahoney on the 15th, perusal of the data revealed the claim of consistency was total BS, my word, not theirs. Did any member of council scrutinize the data before voting? Did any member rebut the assessment that consistency claim was patently false? Not that I heard, at least not by referring to actual data of the kind stated by Mr. Mahoney.
Wrap it up, David.
Okay. The vote's outcome was not all that surprising since it reprises council's vote for the fixed position license plate readers, another case in which substantive data was admittedly lacking, but again, council nevertheless found a vague assertion of device's utility to provide leads persuasive enough to vote 7-0 in favor. At this juncture, with example mounting, God only knows what you think constitutes supportive substantive data. The gnawing feeling persists that something is seriously amiss with the ramrodded clarification.
Others, subjects not on tonight's agenda. Okay, we'll continue. Marshall, you're clearly welcome to participate in these meetings. It would be a shame, though, if you spent all that time eroding whatever goodwill might exist. These meetings are designed to actually conduct business, and whether you like the outcome of a past meeting or not, whether you felt like you were talked to in exactly the right way or not, the village as a whole is depending on this body continuing to make progress and discuss the next subject anew and the next one. And so, you know, we're not going to sit up here and try and tell people they can't come to us with what's on their mind. But that would be a little silly. It would be a waste of the community's time. Maybe that you think is worth it. I can't speak to that. I certainly don't. But the issue is a decided one. It was decided by this body underneath this body's purview. Maybe it was decided wrongly. Certainly there are some who feel that way. They're right to feel that way. What I don't think people are really right to do is continue to take this body and the village's time going forward to try and make some sort of point about how they think any individual up here or group decision was wrong. It's not a decision we're revisiting. It's a decision we made. The record, for those who ask why, is pretty readily available. People can judge for themselves. All these meetings are videotaped. If people are truly interested, they can watch those themselves. They can read all the documents that are associated with them, and they can decide. Perhaps this council made a wrong decision, or maybe it made a right one. But one of the things we keep asking, and I keep asking, is that people don't come up and just repeat. Because it's not as though anyone in this dais or in the audience or watching at home doesn't know the opinions of the people up here or the people in the audience on this subject. So I hope we don't repeat for the next 5 or 6 weeks. That's my sincere hope. I hope we move on. We do have a couple more things under the mayor's report. So let's dispense the first one. I'm just going to go ahead and do this, Enza. We do have a new business item I'm going to place on file. We're going to do that first. This is a little bit of a administrative action here. The village has received an application for Class O outdoor liquor license from Orange and Brew LLC, doing business as Orange and Brew, located at 1027 Burlington Avenue. Pursuant to Section 3-12D of the Liquor Control Ordinance, a public hearing for liquor license application may be waived. The application may be placed on file for a minimum of 2 weeks, subject to public comment prior to the issuance of a license. At this time, I am placing this application on file in the village clerk's office. Barring any objection, once the 2-week waiting period has passed, a Class O outdoor license shall be issued to Orange and Brew LLC, doing business as Orange and Brew, located at 1027 Burlington Avenue. This is placed on file Tuesday, March 21st, 2022. And with that, the next item on our list tonight in the mayor's report is our annual report. You ready to go, Doug?
Yes, Mayor.
Awesome. Preface this report saying I apologize for my colleagues that did not get the memo that you're all supposed to wear blue sweaters the night we do the annual report. Apparently only Greg was paying attention. I'm glad that he's up here. All right, good evening, everybody. We'll start again. Welcome to the 2021 annual report. This presentation is part of a long-standing tradition in Downers Grove, which gives us an opportunity to pause and reflect on the achievements of the prior year. The highlights in this report are the result of the collaborative efforts of an outstanding team of residents, volunteers, stakeholders, village staff members, and elected officials. Last year, we were fortunate to welcome new commissioners Chris Gilmartin and Danny Glover to the Village Council. Both have already contributed greatly thanks to their varied and extensive experiences as longtime Downers Grove residents. Despite the uncertainty of the ongoing COVID pandemic, your village was resilient and remained focused on providing top-quality municipal services rightfully expected by our community. In this report, we'll also talk about the direct results of that commitment exercised by current and prior village councils to remain focused on common goals for the benefit of the community at large. I love our downtown, and I hope you do too. The transformation of our downtown from sleepy to vibrant has been an overwhelming success. The downtown we enjoy today is a product of the hard work and dedication downtown management and the village, the businesses who operate here, and the residents and visitors who support our local businesses. The tax increment finance established in 1997 to replace outdated infrastructure and encourage private investment has ended successfully. The plans laid by village governments in the past and the work of our village staff, Economic Development Corporation, and Downtown Management Corporation have brought us to this point. Over the last 20 years, commercial space has grown by 70%, residential units have grown by 90%, and property values have grown by over 400%. Here's a look at the remarkable transformation.
It takes hard work to develop a thriving community centerpiece, and there came a time when our downtown was in need of improvements. So Downers Grove changed course by creating a tax increment financing district to fund improvements and encourage private investment. And in 1997, the village went to work. With initial infrastructure improvements including roads, streetscapes, and the parking deck, the village laid the groundwork for significant reinvestment and growth. Thanks to the success of the downtown TIF, the area has benefited from $48 million in public improvements and $161 million in private investments, with downtown property values increasing more than 420%. The future of downtown Downers Grove is bright and will continue to attract new business and development.
I always enjoy that video. It's awesome to look at change kind of live and in real time, if you will. We also want to take a moment to offer special thanks to Betty Cheever and council members Marilyn Schnell, Coral Carlson, Tom Sissel, and Mike Gilbert, who had the foresight and courage to begin the revitalization of our downtown, starting with the implementation of the TIF. Thank you also to all the residents, business owners, landlords, and developers who invested and continue to invest in our community. The Village Council recognizes and is united in the belief that our 40-plus-year-old police station and 90-plus-year-old Village Hall need to be replaced. They are in below-average condition, past their useful life, and not designed for the way we operate in 2021. In 2021, the Village completed a facilities replacement and sustainability plan. The plan is to replace these buildings with a new combined police station and Village Hall to be located on the Civic Center property. The combined facility will also include space to accommodate School District 58's administrative offices, a partnership we hope will add value to our shared constituents. A portion of the site will no longer be needed for village operations and will be sold for redevelopment as well. The total project is $55 million and allows the new facility to be substantially completed by early 2024, all without the need for additional revenue. As the project progresses through the design phase, there will be multiple opportunities for public input, including a neighborhood meeting in March and a public hearing at the Plan Commission in April. And we'll be sure to announce opportunities for public input well in advance. Throughout the pandemic year, Village has been committed to working with our local business community to minimize the obstacles which might have prevented them from otherwise doing their best within the rules set by the agencies that license them. The success of the downtown dining program is a direct result of this commitment. With extensive input from the Downtown Management Corporation, the Village established a quick, easy, and free process to allow restaurants to safely operate outdoor dining during Phase 3 of the Restore Illinois plan. With only a simple notification to the Village, restaurants were able to operate based on an established set of rules for outdoor dining. Additionally, more 15-minute parking spaces were added to the downtown to improve customer access for retail and service businesses. This program is an example of silver linings. The expansion of our downtown outdoor dining, largely a triage response to COVID, has proven popular with businesses and patrons alike, and your Village continues to work with its partners to refine and improve the experience. Throughout the year, the Village, Downtown Management Corporation, and Economic Development Corporation work closely to prepare new plans for the future. Thanks to the cooperative nature and strength of those partnerships, the goals and operating plans of these key organizations have been aligned to support Village strategic goals and priority actions, and we have identified long-term sustainable funding sources for both our partner organizations. The Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation is a public-private partnership established by the Village. And since 2006, the Village and the EDC have worked together to attract new businesses, as well as working to diversify and strengthen the economic vitality of our Village. Despite the uncertain and ever-changing COVID environment, in 2021, the Village helped facilitate the following economic development projects: a 167-unit apartment building at Maple and Washington, 9,000 square foot commercial center at 1111 Ogden Avenue. You may know that as the Noodles and Company site. Steinhoffel's Furniture at 1021 Butterfield. Bridgepoint 3, the newest 125,000 square foot addition to the Ellsworth Industrial Park on Belmont. Edward Elmhurst 7,000 square foot facility on Butterfield Road, and the new 7-Eleven Mobile at 63rd and Main. In October of last year, we also had the opportunity to celebrate the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation's 15th anniversary. Many thanks to Village Councils and EDC board members who have supported the efforts of the EDC since its inception. The list of progress is long, and we're all better for their work. In 2021, the Village invested $17 million on 25 infrastructure projects. Infrastructure systems and economies are interrelated. Quality infrastructure can increase connectivity, facilitate productivity, create jobs, and stimulate investment. The key projects included $6 million in street resurfacing, reconstruction and maintenance, complete reconstruction of the parking lot at Forest and Burlington, and new security fencing on the top of the parking deck. One of the biggest projects undertaken was the Burlington Highlands Stormwater, water main, and street resurfacing project. It happens to be a great example of your Village's concerted effort to reduce costs and to minimize repeated disruption to neighborhoods by bundling projects whenever possible. This extensive project to improve the neighborhood's stormwater capacity includes the installation of new storm sewers, construction of a detention pond, patching of the existing roadway, sidewalk improvements at the intersections, street resurfacing, and water main replacement. Your Village remains committed to top-quality infrastructure. And since 2008, the Village has invested over $50 million to construct 86 stormwater infrastructure improvement projects and created a stormwater utility. Through the creation of the stormwater utility, the Village established a recommended level of service to develop and maintain a stormwater management system that will safely convey and store runoff from 95% of rainfall events experienced in any given year. To keep the momentum going, an updated plan scheduled to begin in 2022 was established during last year's long-range planning. The plan calls for the construction of 12 projects in the next 3 years with a preliminary cost estimate of $7.5 million. To finance construction costs, $5.5 million in bonds will be issued, and revenue from the stormwater fees will be used to service that debt. Walkability is important and offers surprising benefits to our health, the environment, our finances, and our communities. To improve the walkability of our neighborhoods and make sure that children who walk to school can do so safely, the village reviewed gaps in our sidewalk system and prepared a plan for the construction of additional sidewalks near District 58 schools. The plan, approved by this council last year, calls for construction of 5 new sidewalk segments near 4 schools over the next 4 years. Our partners at District 58 support this plan, which will result in new sidewalks near Fairmount, Highland, Pierce Downer, O'Neill, and Herrick schools. As part of the plan, a new sidewalk has already been constructed near Kingsley on the south side of Norfolk. Several existing parkway trees were preserved by transplanting them elsewhere, and while safe, walkable neighborhoods are important, we remain committed to minimizing the new sidewalk impacts on existing trees. On February 28th and March 21st, the village participated in the vaccine clinic presented by the District 99 Consortium. The clinic was a great success, resulting in over 1,300 people receiving vaccine. District 99 played the lead role, working hand-in-hand with the DuPage County Health Department and CodaCare. Special thanks to all the District 99 Board of Education members, Superintendent Thiele, and the many District 99 staff members who made this clinic possible. But I'm proud to say your village played a significant role as well, focusing our efforts on arranging appointments for our senior residents. Those who were able to take advantage of the village's help ranged from 74 to over 100 years old. The village also supported the clinic by staffing the event with paramedics, police officers, and executive staff members who provided operational assistance. The successful clinic demonstrated the village's ongoing commitment to providing for the health, safety, and well-being of residents, and further demonstrated the exceptional working relationship we enjoy with our fellow government agencies. In 2021, the village obtained $4.8 million in federal and state grants to assist in funding vital public services, including major infrastructure projects, street resurfacing, tobacco enforcement, and life-saving equipment for our first responders. Thanks to the diligent work of our village team, the total for grants obtained last year included $2.5 million in coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. Downtown Downers Grove is the heart of our community. It's the home to parades, concerts, and festivals. It's the home to our library, our post office, our village hall. As mentioned before, it's also the home to over 1,200 residences. In 2021, the village adopted updated downtown design guidelines to ensure that high-quality buildings and developments continue to be constructed in our downtown. Thanks to the efforts of the Historic Preservation and Design Review Board, this document provides valuable guidance on building design throughout the downtown. The purpose of these updates is to make sure developments meet or exceed established design criteria, in addition to providing an opportunity for public awareness early in the review and approval process, all while maintaining an efficient, predictable, and reliable permitting process. It's always fun to be recognized for good work. In 2021, the village was recognized for outstanding local government achievements in communication and public sector marketing, with 2 National Savvy Awards by the City County Communications and Marketing Association. The village won in 2 separate categories for the following videos: a Bee's Eye View, showing how the Belmont Pollinator Garden developed from a vacant open area into a thriving habitat for pollinators, and Virtual Night at the Firehouse, a series of 6 informative videos produced on various fire safety topics with the goal of emulating the energy and excitement of the in-person event that was canceled in 2020 due to COVID. Congratulations and thank you to all who worked on these successful projects. For over 30 years, the village's financial work has been recognized for its accuracy, transparency, and consistency by the Government Finance Officers Association. Once again, the village has received the Distinguished Budget Award and the Certificate of Achievement in Excellence in Financial Reporting for the comprehensive annual financial report from the GFOA. To some, this may seem boring or even trivial. It's not. It's a testament to how your village works to ensure accountability and transparency in all our financial efforts. The American Heart Association's Mission Lifeline EMS is a program designed to recognize emergency medical service organizations across the nation for excellent heart attack care. The role of EMS in the system of care for these patients is crucial and often sets the course for the patient's outcome. For the 3rd year in a row, our fire department was recognized by the American Heart Association with the Mission Lifeline Gold Plus status, the highest recognition level awarded from the American Heart Association, for its coordinated proactive system of care that turns first responders, hospitals, and other healthcare providers into a team, and uses proven guidelines and best practices to treat patients suffering from heart attacks and strokes, to help save lives and improve patient outcomes from symptom onset all the way through cardiac rehabilitation. This is another distinction that puts Downers Grove Fire Department among the top departments in Illinois and in the nation. Also in 2021, Downers Grove Fire Department achieved Class 1 Public Protection rank for fire protection effectiveness. This classification is based on a community's fire suppression system, including emergency communications, operational effectiveness, and water supply. Community efforts to reduce losses through prior prevention, public fire safety, and fire investigation are also recognized. Property and business owners in communities with an excellent ISO rating, like Downers Grove, benefit from lower insurance rates. Downers Grove is one of 27 fire departments in Illinois and one of only 411 nationwide with a Class 1 rating. Congratulations to the hardworking members of the Downers Grove Fire Department for their commitment to excellence in public safety. The achievements we've noted this evening are a testament to the goodwill of many people who share their time and talents for the betterment of our village. I consider it a privilege as mayor to be able to reflect on these accomplishments of the prior year, and I continue to be amazed at just how many opportunities there are to acknowledge others for their good work. Thanks to the residents and businesses of Downers Grove, my village council colleagues, village staff, and partner organizations who find innovative ways to serve our community. Our village is well positioned for success, and together we will continue to make our community all it can be. Thanks for taking the time to join us this evening. We're looking forward to 2022 together. And that ends my report for the evening. Is there a motion concerning a consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Next item on our agenda tonight is our first reading. We have no active items for this evening. First reading portion of our meeting is the portion of the meeting where we continue discussion or begin discussion on subjects on which we do not plan to take official action tonight. With that, I'll hand it over to Dave Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. There are 6 items on tonight's first reading agenda and 4 topics for discussion. The first item is continued discussion of Forest Avenue, this time focusing on speed reduction measures. Here to present background information on this item is our Public Works Director, Andy Sikich.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'll be presenting some proposed speed reduction improvements on the 4800 block of Forest Avenue. So as you are aware by now, this block is located just west of Main Street between Franklin and Prairie. It has a posted speed limit of 20 miles per hour with parking allowed only on the west side of the street. This parking is restricted to 2 hours and is currently not allowed between 4 and 6 p.m. Recently, as you'll recall, a permanent all-way stop sign was approved at the north end of the block at Prairie Avenue. As part of the process that culminated in that new all-way stop, staff was asked to review options for reducing speeds on the block of Forest, and that is what we are here discussing tonight. The most recent traffic counts that were taken on this block are shown here. These were taken in December, roughly 2 months after the installation of the temporary all-way stop. The daily traffic volume is between 1,400 and 1,500 vehicles per day, and the 85th percentile speeds are 32 to 33 miles per hour. So staff is recommending the following measures to reduce travel speeds on this block. Change the speed limit to 25 miles per hour to allow for effective enforcement. And it may seem counterintuitive that we are trying to reduce speeding by increasing the speed limit. However, in its current condition, the police cannot enforce the 20 mile per hour speed limit. Per the state statute, radar evidence is not admissible within 500 feet of a speed limit change, with the exception of a school zone. So increasing the speed limit to match the surrounding streets will actually improve our ability to enforce it. Number 2, eliminate the existing parking restrictions between 4 and 6 p.m. As I mentioned earlier, the 2-hour parking is currently allowed only on the west side of the street, but it is prohibited between 4 and 6 completely. Parked cars physically and visually narrow lane widths and generally do help to reduce travel speeds. It is important to note that parking in this location will remain restricted to 2 hours, so removing this 4 to 6 p.m. restriction would not encourage commuters to park along this block. Number 3, add a double yellow centerline stripe and white parking box striping to visually reduce lane widths and indicate parking areas. The narrowed lane widths, again, generally do help to reduce travel speeds. And 4, consider adding chicanes by constructing curb bump outs at several locations along this block. Chicanes create a meandering travel path, which generally, again, reduces travel speeds. Staff typically prefers to use an iterative process when we're talking about alleviating traffic speeding concerns. So ideally, we would add the striping first and then add the chicanes at a later date if the striping did not sufficiently reduce the travel speeds. Chicanes are more expensive to install and maintain, and they are more impactful to the character of the neighborhood. However, chicanes and striping could both be installed as part of the initial improvements. So with that, I'll show you what these will look like. These first couple of slides here would show a striping-only option. So this would be the option without the chicanes. You can see, well, or you can't see. I'm sorry, this slide's a little difficult to see. And with a laser pointer, it's tough to show. But you can see the center line double yellow stripe. And then along the north side here, or actually the west side, but the top of the road here in the slide, is where the parking is currently allowed. And there would be a white parking box similar to what you see on the west end of Prairie. This kind of shows you what that would look like from the street level. This is a pretty common striping configuration. In this slide, you can see what the chicanes might look like. And the idea here is to create those horizontal deflection in the lanes, or a zigzag pattern that physically requires drivers to slow down. They can be quite effective, but again, they are more expensive than just striping, and they do tend to be less popular with the residents, as they do represent more of a trade-off regarding the neighborhood character. This is what they might look like from the street level. Obviously, these are just shown conceptually, and we would have to design them before we would know the exact final locations and configuration, but you can get the idea. They might be grass or they might be concrete, depending on the final size and configuration. Here are some photos of what chicanes can look like. These are not in Downers Grove, but these are typical chicanes. So as we consider this issue, it's important to remember that we provide traffic management for the entire village. While each street is unique, many streets have similar attributes regarding traffic volumes and speeds. We will continue to receive requests for speed reduction in other locations, and we have to keep the entire system in mind as we make these recommendations. So what we decide here may be applicable on other similar streets. This list shows 63 known street segments around the village that are similar residential streets to Forest Avenue with traffic volumes over 1,400 vehicles per day and 85th percentile speeds greater than or equal to 33 miles per hour. And here you can see those same streets on a map. So you can see they're pretty much spread around the entire village. It's also important to note that we do not have traffic counts on every street segment in the village, so it's possible there are other locations that we just aren't aware of. Currently in Downers Grove, we do have some curb bump outs that reduce travel speeds in certain subdivisions. However, we don't currently have any of them that are configured just in this way that would cause both travel lanes to zigzag in that S pattern. The figure shown here, though, depicts the council-approved recommendation on Highland Avenue, which is part of the District 99 pedestrian safety study. So this plan is currently in the process of being implemented and will be featured in a public information meeting later this spring. It'll be presented along with other recommendations in the Downers Grove North area. In that study, the consultant recommended chicanes for this block of Highland Avenue between Lincoln and Grant, and these are very similar to what staff is proposing on the 4800 block of Forest. On this slide here, we're showing some rough concept costs for what striping and chicanes would cost. The actual cost would need to be determined, obviously, once they were designed, but this gives you a rough idea of the order of magnitude of the initial construction costs. There would also be ongoing maintenance costs associated with each of these. TAP Commission considered these recommendations at their meeting on January 12th. At that meeting, 5 residents gave public comment. In general, the residents who spoke were primarily against striping and chicanes and did not support changing the speed limit to 25 miles per hour. In addition, several residents requested that parking be allowed on both sides of the street in lieu of adding the striping and chicanes. The TAP Commission voted to recommend removing the 4 to 6 p.m. parking restriction, allowing parking on both sides of the street, and remember, right now it's only allowed on the west side, and then reducing the speed limit to 20 miles per hour on Forest between Franklin and Warren, which is the block just south of this. And I'll get a little bit more explanation here in a second. So this slide here, if you can see it, gives you a comparison between staff's recommendation and what the TAP Commission recommended. Regarding speed limit, staff believes, again, that raising the speed limit to 25 miles per hour is the best way for police to enforce speeding on this block. Alternatively, at the request of several residents, the TAP Commission chose to recommend leaving the speed limit on this block at 20 miles per hour and lowering the speed limit on the block south of this between Warren and Franklin also to 20 miles per hour. Staff does not support this change. However, if the council would prefer to pursue this option, staff recommends taking this specific issue back to TAP so that all the affected property owners can be notified and have a chance to provide comment on that. With regard to parking, staff and the TAP Commission both recommended lifting the restrictions between 4 and 6 p.m., and TAP further recommended that parking be allowed on both sides of the street in lieu of adding striping and chicanes. Staff still believes, again, that striping and chicanes are the best alternatives to reduce speeds on this block. However, if Village Council decides against installing chicanes and striping, staff does believe it's possible to allow parking on both sides of the street. Cars parked on both sides of the street, if done somewhat consistently, could possibly act as de facto chicanes to help slow traffic down. And the existing pavement is generally wide enough to allow cars to be parked on both sides of the street opposite each other and still allow one lane down the middle for emergency service access. So with that, I will open it up to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Andy. Any council comments or questions? We'll start a dialogue here. Right?
Thank you, Mayor. Could you flip back to the slide with the volumes of the north and southbound traffic, please? I'm wondering, Andy, is 1235, how does that compare to the last couple of traffic counts we've gotten, and have things kind of settled? Is this what we anticipate the new normal to be?
Yeah, this is actually the same as these are the last traffic counts that you saw.
Okay.
So these are the same counts we presented. These are the ones we took in December.
And how, forgive me, how do they compare to the last count we had?
So, if I'm remembering back, after the barricades on the north end were removed, I believe traffic was around 1,300 total vehicles per day, and then it went up to 1,400 to 1,500 this week, or this in December. Historically, it's been anywhere from 1,600 to 2,300 vehicles per day total in both directions.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure. Chris?
Yeah, just a question real quick. You mentioned the, if we were to allow parking on both sides, that an emergency vehicle could get through. Could two cars pass each other as well?
They could not.
They could not?
No, and I mean, you do see this sometimes on streets where cars just have to wait their turn, and they you know, it slows them down, for sure.
Sure. Okay. And do we have any sense of what the usage of the parking that exists already is in terms of, I understand the concept of leveraging cars as chicanes, but if no one's parking there, then it's, you know, that's sort of a variable, and I'm just curious if we have any sense of if they're used often enough, or if we think that that would provide sort of an apples to apples comparison of what chicanes might do.
I don't really have any data on that. Anecdotally, people do park on this street.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Rich?
I just had a question. Could you remind us who conducted the District 99 traffic safety study?
Sam Schwartz.
I mean, what unit of government?
It was the Village and District 99.
Village was the lead role on that. We oversaw the contract, administered it.
Okay, was the county involved in that as well, DuPage County?
Only by reference.
They were, after the completion of that plan, we engaged with the county, particularly on the South High area of jurisdiction of Main Street in that area.
Thank you.
That was, if I remember that right, that really, though, was almost in the role of petitioner, right? Kind of. I mean, we didn't really, they weren't part of the, it's not like 99, 58 and the county got together to work with Schwartz to try and figure out a solution. We worked with 99 and Schwartz came up with some possible recommendations. Some of those required involvement with them.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Leslie?
I have a few questions. Are there other 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in that area, or is it all primarily 25 miles per hour?
Primarily, this entire area is 25 miles per hour.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to misspeak, though. There may be one
Okay.
I'm not familiar with or aware of, but they're primarily 25.
And then we mentioned that, you know, we would potentially do things incrementally. Is there a benefit of just striping alone without any of these other options, or, because you mentioned possibly striping first, and then do we have a sense for, is there a benefit of striping alone or a rationale to do that first and see if it helps, or?
Yeah, there is a
Yeah.
hierarchy,
Okay.
you know, where we have done this in other areas where the first line of defense is to stripe it, and then visually that slows most drivers down.
Okay.
So I don't know what quantifiably that would be, but it does generally tend to do that.
And then, is there a way of testing chicanes before spending $25,000 on them? Like, are there barriers or things that we could potentially test for a period of time before we go all in on the full cost?
Yeah, I believe we could temporarily construct some.
All right, those are my only questions. Thanks.
Anyone else?
I just had a quick question in regards to the 20 mile an hour versus 25 mile an hour speed limit. How is the 25 mile an hour speed limit more enforceable than the 20 mile an hour speed limit?
So the state statute doesn't allow radar evidence to be admissible in court if it's within 500 feet of a speed limit change. And so because the streets surrounding this are 25 miles per hour and the street's only 500 feet long, radar evidence of speeding is not admissible on this block, on the entire block, basically.
Right, but aren't we talking about extending it further than the 500 feet?
So
Either way?
the TAP Commission recommended making the block south of this 20 miles per hour, so lowering that speed limit, which you would then have the same problem on that block because it would not be enforceable within 500 feet. But if you're northbound on this block, there would be a stretch that was then no longer 500 feet from that speed limit change. So you're kind of shifting the problem to the block to the south, but you'd have a small stretch that was enforceable.
One of the concerns some staff members have is setting an expectation of enforcement and then not being able to enforce it. That can be challenging. The other is just a matter of resources. Staff would prefer using techniques that would lower traffic speeds that don't require police enforcement. So that's what was driving our thought of the striping and chicanes.
Bruce?
On that note, there was a question around whether or not we could increase penalties based on speed, and it sounds like there's some state laws that are already in effect with that, right? So if we were to drop the speed limit to 20 on the previous street, then how close to the next level of enforcement or penalty are we at the current average of speed? So at 33 miles an hour, 34, does 35 now being 15 miles an hour kick into that additional penalty or more serious offense?
We'll double check to see
Okay.
if that increased fine applies at 15 miles an hour over or 20. We'll double check that.
Yeah, the fine structure is 1 mile, between 1 mile and 20 mile per hour over 21 to 25.
Okay.
26 to 34. That's the state structure of how the fines
Okay.
are structured
So
currently.
going from 25 to 20, even at the average or even at some of the higher speeds, we still wouldn't be achieving being able to penalize at a higher level at the average higher speed. Okay.
Rich?
So if we were to reduce the speed limit on Forest between Franklin and Warren, then we would first be able to enforce that in the block from Franklin to Prairie. Do I understand that correctly?
It would be 500 feet from wherever we change the speed limit. So wherever it changes to 20, 500 feet from there would be where they could start to use radar.
Okay. And then if we were to change the speed limit in the block where the library is, starting at that corner of Forest and Curtis, then we'd have to measure 500 feet north of there in order to enforce that. Do I understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Andy, this is starting to be kind of weird questions from the council, right? How many feet before the speed limit sign? But two things, I guess. One is just a question. Is that directional dependent, though? Because if you're coming southbound, you would have had 25 miles an hour up from, coming south on Forest from north to Prairie.
I believe it is directional.
So you'd really only have that benefit for the northbound traffic, right?
Correct.
Okay. The thing about speed limits, I've got probably an attitude that isn't all that popular in the public, but we've seen plenty of evidence that people aren't paying attention to speed limits. I don't know if that's because they're 25 or because they're 20 or if they even know or care. I guess I'm a little skeptical that they know or care. I'm not sure that changing the speed limit to 20 or 25 is going to make any difference. And this element of enforceability, there's the technical, legal aspect of it, but there's also, as Dave mentioned, the practical aspect of it. I mean, we are not going to be able to regularly patrol a block. I mean, the truth of the matter is we do that on a rotating basis throughout the community and all year long in response to upset situations and requests and demands often associated with schools. It's a constant rotation. It's a problem all over town. It's, unfortunately, I think it's a we problem, to be honest with you. I don't think there's any place you can go in town and not sit on the parkway and see people flying. So I guess I'm just kind of discounting that aspect of this. From my perspective, that aspect of this is pretty much discounted. I don't know that makes a lot of difference. Are there any other council questions or comments? We're obviously not deciding anything tonight. We'll go take some input from the public.
Well, from
Rich?
a practical aspect, I don't know if this is a question for the village manager. If we have someone that was delegated towards traffic enforcement, and then there's a different type of call, if they're called out, then that call would typically supersede that, and they'd have to leave the traffic enforcement.
It depends on how they're assigned and what level of that other call. Obviously, if it's an extreme emergency, yes, all hands on deck on those kind of responses. But over the years, sometimes if you've been assigned as an officer to traffic enforcement, you do traffic, and the patrol division handles the rest of it. Other times, it's been while you're on patrol, you'll get assigned some traffic duty. So all nuances there. So all some of the resource allocation challenges of what type of policing are we doing and that kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. It's not that we don't care, we just can't be in two places at once with one vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Okay, first readings are discussionary. Is there anyone from the audience that wants to speak to this subject?
Before I jump in, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we're finally masks off, so I asked 7 of our residents that would normally be here speaking for 5 minutes at a time to not speak here and not be here. We've got 2 people from our block. I've taken their comments and consolidated them down into one statement, so I hope you indulge me in getting through that. But before I start that, Danny and Bob, the mention of 20 mile an hour, if you are going south or north up that block, right now it's 25 miles an hour. In my opinion, it should be 20 miles an hour because that's part of the commercial district downtown, which is 20 miles an hour through that whole thing. If you want to send it down to TAP to ask the different people on that residence if they would mind if it went from 25 down to 20, you're asking a senior housing, you're asking a pet daycare person, you're asking a yoga, you're talking an orthodontist. I'm quite sure none of those people are going to care if you lower their speed limit from 25 down to 20. So if you want to do that, that's great. But if you raise us back up to 25, that's almost like taking that no left turn out that you gave us to get rid of that southbound cut through traffic. The police at that time, if you go back and look at the notes, they admitted they will not enforce on our street, so they threw us a bone and they lowered it to 20 miles an hour to just potentially slow people down. If you lower the speed limit south of Franklin down to the library, down to 20, because that's part of the commercial district as it is everywhere else in that downtown area, 500 feet past the library will get you to before our street. So if a cop does want to radar on our street, they can do that. I'm not saying they should. I would rather have those cops be doing something else, but it's setting the tone of slowing down. We all need to take a breath, and it's also giving the police the opportunity to radar if they want. To answer the question about is it 25 or 20 in that area, a lot of the residences are 25, but if you go up Franklin and take a left and go west, that's 20 miles an hour right now. So that neighborhood already, 1 block from us, is already 20. And the counts that are up there right now, I want to just, before I get into it, just those numbers are, let's not pat ourselves in the back too much with Prairie and this and everything. There's a lot of people working at home now that weren't working at home a year and a half ago. So yes, things are trending down, but I think we also need to look at what's going on in the area in general. Okay, so before I jump in, I do want to clear up 2 items for those that might have tuned in over the past year. I brought up the Webster dead end a few times and will continue to do so, but I'd like to clarify one thing. Our current mayor and our previous mayor never lived on a corner that benefited directly from that dead ending. I was fed that information, and it's on me for not fact-checking that, and I regret this. Also, I'd like to clarify for people listening to all of our people saying we've been beating the table with the current council for 20 years to fix our street. It's only been 1 year with you guys. You've only seen us for a year, but we have indeed been talking for over 20 years to discuss our issues with accidents, excessive volume, and reckless speed with 3 different sets of village councils. We've had a dozen traffic studies looking at volume, speed, and accident analysis. A couple of full-blown studies has been done by the village's traffic consultant, HLOA, where they discussed our issues as well as our block not being a residential street and not a carrier street, as referenced in the traffic manual, Residential Streets, 3rd edition. We've been moving in incremental steps over these 20 years, so we're not just jumping into anything. We've suggested installing the stoplight on Franklin and Main way back when, over 20 years ago, which actually created our street's cut-through traffic, which is the lifeblood of most of those problems on our street. We installed a no left turn on Prairie, heading off of Prairie to Forest, which is decreasing the southbound cut-through traffic. And we decreased the speed from 25 down to 20 on our block, as I just discussed. To address accidents, we ultimately installed a 4-way stop that appears to be significantly decreasing the number of accidents, which we are very grateful for, and thank you for that. We still haven't addressed the volume, but tonight we will attempt to address the speed. Andy talked about discussing lowering down to 20, and I just already covered that, so I'm not going to go over that again. If you want to talk to TAP and have them send that back down to see if the residents care if you lower it down to 25, from 25 to 20, I guarantee they won't have a problem, and it'll allow us to radar if we want to. Raising it up to 25 will serve absolutely no purpose because nobody's going to radar. If TAP considers chicanes, the cost of $25,000 would work to reduce traffic, why not simulate those and allow parking on both sides? Over the course of the day, those cars will be parked in different places, so it will be mimicking chicanes without spending that money. And if it doesn't work, if you spend the money and it doesn't work, now you just spent $25,000, and now we're going to want you to spend $25 more grand to remove it. The striping is not going to work. It's literally going to make us look more like a commercial area than ever. It's never been about property value, but we do not want chicanes. We do not like striping. TAP committee unanimously said no, and I'm not sure why we're even talking about this at this point. The parking ban, that's fine. I fully appreciate that there's traffic manuals that will say adding chicanes, yellow lines, narrowing roads, etc. will slow speeds, but it won't for our street. 85% of the traffic on our street is northbound traffic. 73% of that traffic guns it up our one short block and turns right on Prairie and heads back to Main Street. That's a minimum of 900 cars on this slow count per day. We're not only talking about volume, we're talking about the type of volume. This is the reckless commuters that do not and will not care about whatever speed reduction measures you put on our street or around our street. They will gun it from Franklin stop sign to Prairie and then move over. The people right north of us don't see that, so if they're going to speak tonight, they're seeing 1,000 cars less on their block than our block, so they don't quite understand the revving of the engines and the gunning it and hitting our people and kids on bikes. This morning, in fact, I was parked on the Forest Avenue on the east side. Another car was parked on the west side to see if cars would slow down, and they didn't. They just gunned it right by me. We tried to compare our street to other streets that also have high traffic, and Andy presented 63 examples. Not one single of those streets, you can go back and look and do your own facts, are comparable to our street. There is not a single one that is 1 block long that has 900 plus pure cut-through traffic that goes onto our street and then moves on to another street. So you cannot look at those cars like that, as an example. I can appreciate whatever fix you ultimately make for our street. You may also think you need to apply to other streets in the future that have issues. Do your own research. You will not be able to use our street as an example for any other street in Downers in a mass-produced product. All of you at one point have stated our one block of Forest has speed and volume issues, or have voted to dead-end a street with 200 cars because of cut-through traffic. I'm not calling any single one of you out tonight, but I do just want to go over a couple of those items just to remind us where we've been and what your opinion was. Historically, we can bring up the dead end of Webster. Mr. Barnett and Jose were commissioners at the time. Speed was not an issue at that corner, volume was. It's been said that that street is different. These cut-through cars were going to the Downers Grove Christian School, where my son went to P3 and 4, and the Lincoln Center for drop-off. It really doesn't matter where those traffics were cutting through. It was cut-through traffic. This was only 200 cars. Our street has 900-plus cars with reckless speeding on it. Somehow, that doesn't warrant addressing. Last year, Bob, you stated, Forest should not have our frequency of cars per day. The idea of moving those cars somewhere else doesn't bother him. It's a reality and part of what we have to do. Many of you jumped in and agreed. When the temporary barrier was put up on our street to potentially fix accidents of speed and volume, recall Leslie and Nicole wanted to remain that way for 3 full seasons. Rich and Chris wanted to see it go at least 1 season. It was left up for 1 week because 200 cars were moved over to Prince and the whole world stopped rotating. Even with that move, Prince's new traffic volume was only 25% of what our volume is. An argument was made that they're a brick street, but recall our street was also a brick street, but then the village decided to pave that over. Can you imagine the public outcry if we paved over any of the brick streets west of us? I'm absolutely not saying we should do that. I love my friends on all those streets. We're trying to come up with something that will work for everybody. But right now, we keep getting the short end of the stick. January 11th, during the council meeting, 5 of you brought up excess speeding and volume on our street, yet only speed was sent to the tap. Why was that? Rich stated he continues to be concerned about speed and volume. Rich also circled back and said he wants to be on record specifically stating that we have a volume issue that needs to be addressed on Forest Avenue. He went on to say we do not have ordinance preventing cut-through traffic, nor do we have ordinances that control traffic volume, but he said sometimes as a village council member, you just have to know what the right thing to do is, and you need to act on that. Chris, too, specifically said he wants to be on record saying he wants volume, he thinks the volume continues to be an issue, and we need to address it. Leslie said speed and volume are both issues. She even said that she was excited to hear what TAP came back with for both speed and volume, yet only speed was sent to TAP. She lives close to the corner, to the example of the Cumner example, one of the ones that Andy presented, and agrees that it's not a fair comparison. That's a long street with long stretches between stop signs, and it's not being used as a main street cut-through, which was exactly what our one block of Forest is specifically being used for, a cut-through. I'm almost done here. A few residents on other streets have said residents on our block knew what we were getting into when we purchased the home. That's just not true. It's gotten way worse over time because of all the awesome developments that Bob, you presented in your annual report. Love those things. All the new restaurants, all the new Spenga, all the new everything. But that traffic is finding our way to our street. And even if the increased traffic didn't happen, don't we live in a fluid society where you strive to make things better? The new stop signs on Prairie is a recent example. The residents on Prairie knew what they were moving onto a street with heavy volume and heavy speed. We shouldn't do anything to help that street, right? Absolutely not. That's wrong. We should have fixed that street, and we did. Why do we have so much northbound traffic on our street versus southbound traffic? 85% north, 15% south. It's because we fixed the southbound cut-through when we gave the commuters on southbound Main a dedicated right lane to turn onto Franklin, and then we installed the no left turn off Prairie so cars can't cut down Forest. This didn't hurt any commuters, and it saved us from an additional 1,000-plus cars speeding southbound down our street. I just don't understand why we can't fix the northbound cut-through traffic as we should have done when we first installed the Franklin and Main stoplight way back when. To address excessive volume and reckless speeding on our one block, I'm asking you all to please install right turn only at Forest and Franklin and finally address this street's issues. Again, to make this easy for all people and not inflict any undue damage to anybody else, I want to make sure this works for everyone, so I'm embarrassed to tell you how many hours I've spent on this. But to minimize issues to other drivers, I've noted for this to work correctly, only during a 1-hour period in the morning, during the 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. push on weekdays, the Franklin light will need to have up to 30 seconds of green light added to its cycle. Installing a left turn light also going north will help efficiently move cars. If no cars are waiting to turn from Franklin onto Main, that light will remain green on Main, and nothing changes. If cars are waiting, that light can easily be programmed and extended to allow the merging traffic to happen.
Tom, are you close?
I am. I've got 5 minutes, but if you want to cut me off, I've got 2 people that'll finish reading this for me. Otherwise, they're not speaking. This is the only thing you're going to hear from us. I promise I'm almost done.
Yeah, I know, but part of this is not, I appreciate you.
I'm getting to it right now.
Hang on, just hang on,
Okay.
just hang on. I appreciate you trying to consolidate, I do.
It
One
could
of
have
the
been 45 minutes.
One of the other elements here, of course, is that we want other people to feel like they can speak, and not
Right.
everybody should have to wait a half an hour to do so.
Correct.
So maybe you could find a way to wrap that up in 4 minutes? How about that? Can you do that?
I can do it in 6.
All right. Try for 5.
I've spoken with the leadership of St. Joe's, and they're fully on board with this light change and this information I've given them. I spoke with IDOT today, and another Forest resident spoke with the same gentleman last week. IDOT stated the stoplight is not a state light. It is a village light that they can do whatever they want with to keep traffic moving. He stated that the railroad has no say in this because it's greater than 400 feet from the railroad, and there's no chance of backup, and it won't affect the tracks. To add and extend up to 30 seconds to east-west green light, if needed, for only 1 hour in the morning, this whole thing will work. All you have to do is go to the pole, make an adjustment. It's not going to cost any money except for a little staff time. I sent you an email showing a study I did showing the durations of the green light on the east and west and also the north-south. I won't bore you with the details, but Franklin is 8 seconds up to 25 seconds. Maine is roughly 55 seconds, but up to 3.5 minutes. Factors influencing this are cars wanting to turn off Franklin onto Main, whether it's a pedestrian pushing the walk button, meaning that things change all the time. So these lights are not 100% synced. Things change, and they will go back in together. When we originally added the stoplight at Franklin and Main, you could have made a case that it'll screw up all the timing. You could have made the same claim when we added the green arrow on Prairie and Main stoplight, and also on Burlington and Main stoplight. We didn't because those were the right things to do, and now this is the right time to do this. This is wrapping up now. So what is the worst case scenario if we add a right turn only and we tweak the light? We aren't adding any additional cars to Main Street, so the argument stating we can't do this because it's either going to interfere with whatever traffic changes you're talking about doing with D99 at Main and Grant, that they just can't be made because all the current Main Street will be the same. We're just having cars enter at Franklin versus speeding down our street and entering on Prairie. No other street in Downers Grove can be used as a comparison, so you don't have to worry about other people saying, well, you did it for them, you got to do it for us now. You've all said at one time excessive speed and volume is an issue, and Bob, you even stated during your Webster dead-end discussions, you will do anything you can do to fight against cut-through traffic anywhere in Downers Grove as long as you're at that bench. I'm asking you to do that now. You may additionally get a dozen emails from citizens asking you not to make this change. These are old dog, new tricks people talking about different routes. They do have a point, but the worst case is they move 1 block over and maybe wait for 30 seconds at a stoplight, and they're on their way. Can't we all wait 30 seconds and add 30 seconds to our morning commute? Another benefit of the right turn only is eliminating speeding traffic turning west on Franklin, heading into the Prince Pond area. That will now be gone. We are not closing Forest Avenue with this change. Nothing changes the southbound traffic. You'll still be able to travel north on it because you'll be able to enter it from east and west Franklin. What we're going to do is get rid of all that 900-plus cars of excessive speeding. I should also note 83% of the accidents were caused by northbound traffic. Remove these reckless drivers, coupled with the 4-way stop, and we will remove accidents for sure. Last paragraph. If we make this change, it'll bring our volume of residential streets equal to other residential streets, except our volume will still be 3 to 4 times more than Prince. We will still have random speeders, which we can handle, but the 900 pure reckless traffic will be virtually gone. Thank you again for listening. I hope we can make this change. If you don't want to add it to the active agenda to vote, I'm guessing you might consider sending it down to TAP. I would think this would be a mistake. As you've noted, they're a recommending body. Over the past year, we've seen several types of recommending bodies unanimously give you decisions, and the council has taken a different path. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying the buck stops with you guys. So let's finally fix our street and add this to the active agenda to vote on for next week. Last paragraph. This is not a popularity vote or a political one. If we wanted to make Prairie 40 miles an hour or Ogden 50 miles per hour, you would get a popularity vote, but that's just not the right thing to do. As emails and statements come in that may oppose this, you need to peel back the complaints and analyze if someone is being hurt or if it's a 30-second inconvenience. An inconvenience we've all overcome at some point when our favorite route has been changed by a light, a right turn only, installation of a one-way road. In a matter of weeks or months, we've been retrained and the world continues to rotate. Thank you, and sorry that was so long.
It's a lot to digest.
I know, sorry.
Almost undigestible. Does anybody else want to speak to this subject? Okay, any other questions, comments from the council? Craig, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to first thank Mr. Schroeder. I think he must have been a debater in high school. He talks rather quickly. This is what I'm saying. So I'm a little disappointed that the neighborhood seems to be much more interested in a physical barrier on traffic going north than dealing with it as more of a speed issue, and that's my biggest problem. I have zero interest in stopping traffic from moving north on Forest. It's certainly not right now. Could we get there? Possibly. I think the way you deal with it is by slowing the traffic down. The reason it's an attractive cut-through is that there's really no impediment to driving really fast on that stretch of Forest. So let's slow them down. Let's find ways to drop that speed. And by the way, whether it's 20 or 25, I mean, people are going 33 and a 20, they're going to go 33 and a 25. The speed limit, those numbers tell me, is irrelevant. And this is why I like the idea of the striping and the chicanes. You turn this into a slalom, people aren't going to be doing 30, 40 miles an hour anymore, and they're certainly not going to be doing some of the crazier speeds that we've seen in some of the data. The repeated analogy to Webster, I think, is misplaced. Webster goes into 55th Street. Prairie is a busy street, but it's not 55th Street. It's not 5 lanes wide. And the comparison, as a result, I think is incorrect. You have to look at the fact that there were significant visibility problems, and not to mention the cut-through traffic. Webster and Forest and Prairie are entirely different in my head. The neighborhood likes to talk about over and over again, there's no other street like this. There are unique aspects to Forest because of the connection downtown, because of the train track crossing, because of North High School. I've cited all of these in the past. But at the same time, there are 63 other streets that meet these criteria in terms of the traffic volume and the speed. So are there universal lessons that we can put into place? Absolutely there are. And I think we're seeing that in some of the recommendations that came from staff. So in short, I'm 100% on board with the recommendations from staff. I like the idea of parking on Forest, but at the same time, I don't think that solves the problem. I think you need a consistent physical change that slows traffic down, and studies have shown that chicanes will do that. Striping will do that. I'd like to put those both into place, and if that means we go back to TAP to have them talk to the neighborhood about chicanes, then I'd say let's go ahead and do it. But I think we jump right to it rather than waste any more time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick staff question. The arrow light at Main and Franklin, the left turn green, right? This has been brought up before. Can someone remind me what that discussion was that we've had in the past regarding that light?
Sure, it came up in October during this topic, and basically we were concerned that any changes to that interconnected traffic signal would back up on Main Street and could create a situation where folks are looking for alternatives to Main Street.
Thank you.
Leslie.
Yeah, I do have another question. I do still struggle with the volume that goes northbound on that just small one block. 1,200 cars is a lot. And to know that essentially that rate of speed is happening within one block, I empathize with the concerns that is relatively unique within the village. But I also know that I'm probably of the minority who would be willing to do a right turn only going forward. So in the interest of trying to get some sort of compromise or agreement with my fellow commissioners, I still would prefer, if we're looking into the chicanes, to try and do something for a short period of time. My other question is, so it sounds like if we had parking on both sides of the street, we would not be able to have cars pass one another going opposite directions, correct? It would not be wide enough for that to have two lanes?
That's correct.
Would it be possible to almost mimic that with parking, mimic chicanes almost with parking spots and have alternative parking spots in certain areas? And I don't know if you could do bump outs for, delineating where that parking ends so that you literally can't drive straight through. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if there are certain things that we could do to make that physical infrastructure clearer and potentially do that without, the $25,000 price tag, just to see if this would, hopefully, if it reduces speed, then again, similar to what Commissioner Jose was saying, if it's not advantageous anymore, hopefully then they will stop using that route, which is what we did see with Prairie a little bit. We saw a pretty big drop in traffic counts because, they weren't able to use that as a throughway anymore. So if we could do that for Forest, I think that would take care of indirectly of some of those volume issues. So I'm willing to compromise and look into some of this to start. But I also would prefer, if we do that, not to go all in on that $25,000 chicane price tag.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
I just wanted, can you describe that a little more? I wasn't totally following.
Yeah, so instead of having, parking full block on both sides, could we have a series of parking spots on, the eastern side and that have it be staggered, right? Where you've got staggered parking, so it almost mimics the movement that you would have to do with the chicanes and stripe it that way, right? And so
sorry to interrupt, that might actually be more of a striped chicane, except the alternating parking boxes, some on the east side, some on the west, would cause the center line to jog back and forth, right?
So that would, it would still, in your mind, as a trial, that would still be paint, essentially paint only? Or would you see temporary barriers that caused?
I mean, and
what's that look
I
like?
wonder if we could have a temporary barrier, say at like the front of the section, right? So that people couldn't theoretically drive through those. I don't know if that's feasible or not, but it seems like a lower cost option to start with rather than going all into the tens of thousands of dollars for the chicanes.
So is that, we sort of have, certainly not a chicane, but we have the physical narrowing as a function of sort of ending the parking box on Carpenter, right? Is that kind of the picture that you had in your head?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're taking that message as a suggestion to try to find a way to test the chicane concept in a low-cost manner that's easily changeable. So I'm sure Andy and his team could come up with some ideas if that were the direction.
I still, the iterative process, the way Andy described it, or, taking smallest steps first and continuing down the path like we talked about earlier is still my preference. I'm not happy with the speeds in this street or the other 63. Or probably many of the rest. So if we want to keep working towards that end, I'm happy with trying to do some things that would still preserve the functionality of that street for all the residents in town. I mean, one thing that I personally struggle with because of my travels on Forest is whether or not 900 cars are really turning right at the light and heading out of there, because there's a lot of people going north. And that route is valid for people. There is no, in my mind, there is no reason we should tell people that they can't traverse a particular street. So, I'm sure there's going to be lots of social media commentary about Webster probably coming, but I feel like that's a different situation. In this case, I think we need to try and reduce those speeds, and I agree with Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit that Prairie might be a good analogy. If this became less convenient, it might really change the traffic patterns on that street. And I think slowing them down is something we should necessarily attempt, irrespective of how any one of us feels about the volume. I think we should be trying to slow these cars down. So I'm in for trying to figure out how to do that. And if it's a temporary chicane as a starting next step, I'm up for it. I mentioned before, I think up here, I know I mentioned it to Tom when we were at Pete's. There's no particular predetermined end to this for me. I think Greg kind of alluded to that. But taking steps to get there that do the least amount of constriction and preserve the street's accessibility to everybody in town should be our goal. That doesn't predetermine that the chicane is the end point, or for that matter, that a right turn is an end point. It's a matter of the process. We think we made a mistake when we started this process 8 months ago. I think we're doing it right now, iterative steps, addressing the things we can address that we, right first, which is the accidents first, and now speeds is the right approach. Let's see what happens if we get those speeds down. If those speeds come down, maybe other things happen to the traffic patterns in the area. So that's my thoughts on it. Anyone else up here want to weigh in? I'm sorry, Rich?
Yeah, so I have a few thoughts, a little bit in random order. I'm not opposed to center lines because I live on Camden, and to get to Camden, you drive on Concord, and as you head west on Concord from Dunham Road, you come to Springside, and there's parking spots on the north side of that street, and for two reasons. There's a bump out at the end, and then right after that bump out are a number of parking spots that are delineated by the white lines, because kids from Downers Grove South park there. There's also Concord Park. There's a reason for that. Never considered that to be commercial looking at all. It does serve its purpose, because when I hit that particular place, I'm forced to slow down because of the narrowing, and then I'm reminded that I'm slowing down for a reason. You know, we talk about volumes. We did not instruct TAP to look at volumes, because four of us up here did not say I want to look at volumes. I see this as a little bit more complex than that, in that we've got the nature of the volume. And the nature of the volume that is most disconcerting to me is that you have some 85% of the northbound traffic is exceeding the speed limit. And the fact that cars are gunning it as they cross north on Franklin just to get the next light on Prairie. In a perfect world, I'd like to see a situation where the northbound turn onto Franklin and then a protected turn northbound onto Main Street was as smooth and easy as the reverse is when I travel south on Main Street and forced to get home, because like Nicole and I live on the southwest side, it's really hard to not involve driving on Forest Street. For me, as I'm coming south to get back home, it's very natural to go all the way to Franklin, take that right turn there, even if there's a stop light, it's a right turn on red, and I can make that turn very easily. And then when I get to Franklin, there's not a stop there, I can go through. So it's a very easy flow through. So if I were king, that's what I would like to see happen. I've read a lot about chicanes. It intrigues me that we're putting them in on Highland, but also the temporary measure of letting cars act at that. A little bit junkier and perhaps less sophisticated, depending on the cars that are parked there, than putting chicanes. But I think it will solve the problem, give us a chance to see if we make that street less comfortable for people to cut through. We want to make it less comfortable for them to speed. We do have a history of trying to reduce cut-through traffic. And for some reason, I am drawing a blank on, as you're heading south on Main Street, you guys, didn't want cars cutting through that neighborhood, commuting to miss the traffic light at 55th and Main Street. So there's a no right turn sign. I know the mayor doesn't like those, so that is duly noted. And there are other places in Leslie's neighborhood that was a big concern, that people heading north on Fairview would not try to skip the light at 55th Street and cut through that neighborhood. There have been other great instances like that. So I would like us to focus on reducing the cut-through traffic and the volume. You know, this seems to be a zero-sum. I've been approached by residents say, well, they never should have moved on that damn street, that's their own fault. And my view there is, yeah, there's a certain amount of, you know, knowing what you signed up for, but our scenario has changed, and we do have to be responsive to the residents to make changes occasionally, and the perfect and recent example was Prairie. We had people complaining about speeding on Prairie, not letting kids cross the street, so we put in some very effective stoplights, and we're doing some other narrowing things. So it shows that we can be responsive and still make some of those changes. So I guess what I'm saying in netting this out, I'd like to see some temporary measures. I am gun shy that one of the very first things we did was when we put up the barrier on Prairie, that cars turned the wrong way, facing oncoming traffic, creating a very dangerous situation. So that made me kind of gun shy, and as I've said before from this seat, we deal with a lot of unintended consequences. I also understand that we've recently hired a traffic engineer with a lot of experience, so wouldn't mind having that individual, based on his experience, to take a look at this as well.
Thanks, Rich. Chris?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what's been said. I am pleased to hear many of my fellow commissioners talk about keeping this all options open. I think I, too, was in favor, maybe in the minority, of considering the right turn on Franklin and understand the idea of doing things in an iterative way. I think that what it boils down to me, and many of the things that Commissioner Culvaney has said I agree with, too, in terms of the volume, I think it does, and I think this is part of your point, Rich, I think it does make a difference the type of volume. So the 60 streets that we're looking at may have comparable volume, but I think this idea of cut-through is important, and as was pointed out, we have many measures around town of trying to avoid or prevent cut-through. The fact that there is such a high percentage of these folks going onto Prairie to Maine makes me lean more towards figuring out how we can better control the volume. I hope some of the measures that have been recommended to slow speeds do that. But I just want to say I'm pleased to hear that we're not ending on that we are trying to think beyond that, because I've said it before, I feel like a broken record, but I do feel like this street is unique in that way. So I'm going to support any effort we can to not only reduce speeds, but reduce volumes. Thank you.
Thank you. Else?
I'll go
Cool.
here. I too am in support of doing any temporary chicane type measures. As Commissioner Culvaney brought up, right near us, we have striping, we have chicanes. To be honest, he brought it up to me and I was like, oh, you're right. I never noticed either one. I think this is all a big balancing act between trying to give the residents of this street the peace of mind, and also try and make sure, again, that we do think about the whole community when we do these things. I know, you guys don't want striping, you don't want chicanes. I think if we were to do permanent chicanes, I would like to see ones that have the grass that look more natural. That was just an initial thought that I had, because I know you don't want it to look a certain way or commercial or less residential, and I understand that. And the ones by Commissioner Culvaney and I, like I said, I didn't even notice them. They blend right in. They look great. So if we could do something like that moving forward, should we find that these temporary measures are effective, I think that that's what I would like to see. I know I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Right now, I do not think that I could get on board with a right turn only at Forest and Franklin. I think I would like to see some of these smaller incremental steps and see how those go. I think ultimately speed, from what we've heard, that is a huge issue. That's what causes everyone to feel unsafe. And I think if we manage that, we will better be able to, have people on that street feel comfortable with where they're at, even if the volume is a little bit more than you would like. I think if the speeds were taken care of, some of that safety might be there. So again, it's a big balancing act up here for us to make sure we're listening to residents. We're trying to, to compromise, as Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit said, and try and work something out for this community in those small incremental steps. So that's where I'm at the moment, Mayor.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Anyone else got anything to add? Danny?
I guess without repeating what my fellow commissioners said, I too think that the incremental temporary measures with the chicanes is the correct approach. Would like to still consider, even though, it's hard to enforce the 20 mile per hour, and like Rich said, maybe make that down to the library. I don't see any harm in that. I really don't see how that could negatively affect anything. And like Tom said, it could potentially slow some people down, probably not all, but it has the potential of slowing some people down. So if we could include that in some way, I'd be in favor of that. That's it.
Anyone else? I had a couple of minor questions, Andy, for Andy. If you'd mentioned that there were ongoing maintenance costs associated with some of this striping, I understand. Is there an ongoing cost with the chicane component, or?
So we can get back to you next week with any maintenance costs.
All right. And then what would be, again, maybe a comment for next week, or that we could follow up, what would be our team's thoughts on duration for sort of next round of tests? If we do sample stuff, how long are we going to look at that?
Both of those, got some great direction from council tonight. We have some new team members on Andy's team. I'd like to take a look at those very things and come back with a proposal based on council direction.
Okay. I want to clarify one thing, Commissioner Cullivaney eyeballing me with this no left turn sign thing. And it may be confusing for anyone who's watched this or watched Webster for that matter. What I have said many times from up here and still say is that I'm skeptical of signs. I see too many people, whether it's a speed limit sign or even a do not enter sign. I was watching people drive the wrong way down Burlington the other day. Physical attributes, in my mind, are preferable when we're trying to encourage certain behavior. And so those can be closed streets, those can be no right turn only things, those can be chicanes, those can be bump outs, lane narrowings. I'm just a big skeptic of signs, so that's what he's getting at, and he's not wrong.
I stand partially corrected, or I sit here partially corrected.
All right, we'll move on to the next one. Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. The next three items concern a proposed subdivision in the 6,000 block of Fairview. Here to provide background information on this petition is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Thank you, Manager Fieldman. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. As Manager Fieldman said, this is a plat of subdivision, a right-of-way vacation, and zoning map amendment. The property is located on the west side of Fairview Avenue between 59th and 63rd Street, shown here circled. If we zoom in, it consists of a single property just under 3 acres in size. The current site outlined here includes a stormwater sewer that bisects the property from east to west. It's located within a 10-foot public right-of-way. The public right-of-way shown here is not scale. And it was dedicated to the village in 1957 as a right-of-way. The current practice would be to place these storm sewers in an easement instead of a right-of-way. So the petitioner is proposing to vacate this right-of-way so that they can provide developable lots. Property also includes approximately 33 feet of land along the east side of the property that is currently improved with Fairview Avenue. The petitioner is proposing to dedicate this land to the village so that the Fairview Avenue is within the right-of-way there as well. Petitioner is proposing to rezone the property from a current R1 zoning classification to an R3 zoning classification. These yellows are very similar, but R3 is to immediately west of the property. So the proposal is to rezone from an R1 residential detached house 1 to an R3 residential detached house 3. Specifically with the property, the petitioner is proposing to subdivide the property into 7 lots, 1 through 7 north to south, with an outlot on the west side of the property to provide stormwater detention. The new lots meet the 75-foot minimum lot width and lot areas defined in both the subdivision and the zoning ordinance. With regard to stormwater, the existing stormwater pipe that carries runoff from the west to the east will be rerouted north and then east to tie into the existing storm sewer within Fairview Avenue. And the outlot will serve to provide stormwater management detention basin here for the subdivision itself. And outlot A will be covered entirely in a public utility and drainage easement, so that is maintained that way. With regard to the comprehensive plan, it identifies this area as single-family detached. The proposal is consistent with surrounding neighborhoods. Comp plan calls for a variety of housing and improves stormwater management as well. At the February 7th Plan Commission, the Plan Commission found that the standards for zoning map amendment for rezoning from R1 to R3 were met, and that the proposed lots met the platted subdivision requirements as shown in the subdivision ordinance. And with regard to the proposed right-of-way vacation, that's at council discretion per your policy shown here. Petitioners here as well tonight. If you have any questions for them, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have tonight as well, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any council comments or questions about this one? Anybody from the audience want to comment? Okay, well, that was quick and easy.
Stan did such a great job on that item that I will introduce him on the next two items, actually, Stan.
Thank you, Mayor Fielman. The next item before you is a special use petition for the property at 1000 to 1010 75th Street. It's on the south side of town, on the north side of 75th Street. Property is outlined here in blue. The property consists of a single building, a commercial building that's divided into 2 tenant spaces. Multiple personal vehicle repair and maintenance businesses have been operated on the site since 1989. Currently, the west side of the building has been vacant for several years. Petitioner is requesting a special use, and as part of that, is going to provide the following improvements: to install a handicap stall and a regular parking space in front of the building, provide a pedestrian connection to 75th Street, install a trash enclosure, and then improve some landscaping on the site so that they can continue to use the building for its commercial use, which is a personal vehicle repair and maintenance use. With regard to the comprehensive plan, this area is corridor commercial, consists of smaller regional commercial centers, serve both local residents and surrounding region, and we are looking for landscaping and beautification in these properties as well. Planning Commission considered the petition at their February meeting and also found that the special use standards shown in this section were met. Petitioners here again tonight, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you as well tonight as well. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any council comments or questions? Rich, please.
Yeah, I'm pleased to see this development going in. I think it's a perfect use for that particular site. I also did want to comment on the previous subject, if I may. I sat on Plan Commission a few years ago, and there was a proposal for townhouses that did not get passed, and the residents of that neighborhood were greatly in favor of single-family homes. So it's been a difficult spot, and I'm pleased to see that we are putting single-family homes there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any comments from the audience? I appreciate people investing in our community, large and small investments, and particularly those that look for ways to beautify their spaces. They're continuing to use it, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I will go ahead and move on to the last item that was presented tonight. It was an updated outdoor dining program. Last month, I'm sure everybody will recall that we adopted changes to the village's outdoor dining program as related to downtown. At that meeting, Village Council requested that staff explore further amendments to the regulations for outdoor dining in areas outside of the downtown. So amendments proposed tonight provide for the outdoor dining from March 15th to November 15th. That's consistent with what has been done in the past. To allow businesses outside of the downtown to provide parking within or adjacent to private parking lots. Seating does need to be separated from parking areas and drive aisles with a physical barrier, and it may not displace required parking. So that's something we want to make sure that we have enough required parking and we're not limiting parking. The proposal is to prohibit tents through the village, to limit the number of seats that are outside to no more than what is seating on the inside, and then a couple of different exemptions here. Cafes consisting of 1 or 2 tables. Currently in the downtown, those don't require permits, but to extend that throughout the community. And then cafes that are located within permanent enclosures that have been previously approved as part of a building permit, not to require those to come in to play. So sometimes we see new restaurants or new business owners put an outside cafe in that's part of a building permit. It's not on the sidewalk, but in a designated area. So those would be exempt from outdoor dining permits as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have about this topic.
Thank you, Stan. Anybody? Danny?
Yeah, I'm very pleased to see that we obviously continue this through the downtown area, but also extended it to outside the downtown area. I think a lot of people in town really appreciate that and are going to really take advantage of it. And I think everything looks good except I would like to direct staff to remove the restrictions on the tents and explore options that would include properly installed temporary structures. Like I said, I think the community has come to really enjoy these dining establishments, and in many cases, in weather conditions, dining outside would be miserable without the use of some type of temporary or permanent structure. I can understand the wish that most people would probably want a permanent structure to be installed, which I agree. I would also prefer that people would do that. Unfortunately, I don't think that all businesses are in position to do that, as they're still recovering from the past few years. Just having mask mandates just lifted yesterday. So people are still weary of going out, and I think they would really appreciate to have somewhere comfortable to sit and dine at these establishments still. So I'd like to see some way that we can include tents, and if we can draft up some kind of ordinance to include those measures. That's all. Oh wait, one more thing. I would also like to explore the potential to amend the building code section that limits the operation of the tents to 180 days to mirror that of the outdoor dining program of March 15th to November 15th, or 240 days. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Others? Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I also appreciate staff bringing this forward, especially with such speed. It's nice to see this come, and I think it's a good thing for our village. I have to disagree with Commissioner Glover on the tents. I'm fully in favor of the limitation on tents, prohibiting that. If you're wary of dining indoors, I don't see how a tent that's enclosed on four sides is going to eliminate that concern. And I appreciate the cost, but I would like to see more permanent types of structures, whether it's some kind of roof overhang, or could be as simple as tables with an umbrella. That allows a lot more outdoor seating, that gives you at least a little bit of break from the sun. I have no interest in expanding the temporary use of tents from 180 to 240 days for the same reason. I think 6 months of temporary use is an awful lot, and I don't see the need to make it anymore. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Others? Leslie?
I just have a quick question. So, I don't expect the answer today, but could you give us an idea of what some of those more, outside of like umbrellas and awnings and things, what some of those permanent structures could look like, and maybe what we've seen in other municipalities that have had outdoor dining, just so that we can get an idea for
In the
what
meantime,
options
think
there are.
Three Corners and Panera on Ogden.
Sure.
I think we'll give you some examples.
Great, thank you.
Rich?
Yeah, I'm literally undecided as to permanent structures versus tents. I've made mention before that I took a trip to Galena and I saw their outdoor dining and the tents. And but there were some places where they had some really cool large umbrellas that almost made it look like a tent. And I sent village manager some pictures of that. It could be a reasonable alternative. So I'm going to need more input on what the concerns are related to the tents, and then what are the actual needs of the restaurant owners, because I'd like to hear their view on that. I mean, I certainly think that some could afford a permanent thing, but also I would think that'd be a real barrier to entry, and then I'm not sure how that would work, particularly over, are we talking about areas outside of downtown? How could we do a permanent structure over parking spots, over the 27 parking spots that we own? So I'm gonna put me down as I don't know.
Chris?
Yeah, I too appreciate the speed at which this has come to us. I think this is a representation of us thinking outside of downtown that I think is great. From a tent standpoint, I tend to think that I would support those. I'm not sure I would go beyond the 180 days. But I wasn't thinking about tents as all enclosed. In my head, I was just thinking of a covered tent, and that to me feels a little better. So I understand the idea of you're going to close the tent, maybe think about it permanently. But I don't know that we can get that nuanced in our distinction, or if we really want to. Of course, I would support I love the idea of permanent structures, but I do know that the cost of that can be significant, and I think I agree with Commissioner Glover. Maybe I think these places may not be quite out of the woods yet with the pandemic, and so I might be supportive of the temporary tents now, and then we look back in a year and then talk about it maybe again. But I think this outdoor dining is fantastic, and anything we can do to to support it and to encourage it is good in my book.
Cool. Any thoughts?
Sure, Mayor. I don't want to be too repetitive. I appreciate staff looking into all of this. I appreciate the fact that we have restaurants outside of the downtown that are going to be able to benefit. Kind of in the same boat with Commissioner Colavani, where I don't know at the moment, would like some more information. I can absolutely appreciate the fact that many of our restaurants and establishments may still be struggling. However, there is a part of me that agrees with Commissioner Jose as well, that, going from 180 to 240 days, 6 months is quite a bit for a temporary use. So I would like to see some alternatives to permanent structures that are not tents. Does that make sense? Thank you.
I'm a fan of the tents. I think this is one of the things that we kind of discovered. I understand why we have temporary uses, and I understand why we have limits on them. But I think the tents really add something to our community, and I'd like to understand better what it would take. What would be the code elements, what would be the enforcement elements, what would be the permitting elements. I'd like to understand that in a little more detail of if we were going to allow tents and what that looks like. The temporary or the outdoor permanent structures, I think probably everybody up here loves that premise, whatever our experiences with it may be, but that's a huge cost. And I guess I'm wondering, this is going to sound probably like we're splitting hairs, but I'm wondering if there's a difference that we ought to be thinking of between temporary uses and something that we haven't necessarily talked about that's maybe seasonal. We have a temporary use for a host of reasons. A lot of them have to do with public safety. And I don't think we want to be just ditching those things, right, or ignoring them. But I can see how there would be seasonal applications of uses that were still regulated that are not the same. And we're talking about, temporary uses can be applied for and used by a host of folks, not just restaurants. So there's some differences. I'd like to seriously consider find a way to allow tents for our restaurant community.
So that would be a code amendment to the code section that was referenced by Commissioner Glover. Would not change the permitting process. It would just add additional days for which tents could be operated.
We've got elements, though, that might be in the way elsewhere, right, of extended periods of tents being up.
Just that building code.
Just that's the only element?
Those building and life safety codes referenced in tonight's council questions.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm interested in pursuing amendments therein, I guess, that would allow for us to have these tents in place longer. They may not be something I end up deciding I like, but I want to really understand what they are better. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. The physical barriers that we're talking about, Dave, could you talk me through what those look like?
So those could change based on the petitioner. It's more of a performance standard. We're just looking for an element of safety if you're going to put an outdoor cafe in or adjacent to parking lanes and travel lanes. So we wrote more of a performance standard. So we know what we have downtown. Those are very substantial barriers. There might be other barriers that are less substantial, but I'll offer the safety we're looking for.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. I know those are pretty heavy duty.
Those would absolutely qualify. There might be some things, and we're really looking to the private sector to propose these things. I'm sure there's some creative ways to provide that safety that would meet this performance standard.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what some of those other alternatives are, because I'm not necessarily thinking that everybody's going to end up building a giant, cement awning or something over top of their cafe, but I think there's it's going to look a lot better, even if it's just, picnic tables with umbrellas, than if you have a giant tent up for, now 9 months out of the year. To me, it's an aesthetic thing. I'm all in favor of encouraging outdoor dining and I think it's great for our restaurant community, but I'd like it to meet the same sort of aesthetic standard that the rest of our village does. Thank you.
It's an RV in the yard.
Yeah, we don't allow those either.
I know, that's why I said it.
So, sorry, just a clarifying question. You mentioned that right now, as it's being proposed, we are saying prohibiting tents, and some of us are saying that we want to see that differently. The only change that you are suggesting is if we went ahead with Commissioner Glover's suggestion of extending past 180 in a temporary use. Did I understand that right?
Right. So one of the things the staff is concerned about is the idea that your temporary use would run for 240 days, but your tent permit would only run for 180 of those days, creating a significant enforcement challenge. So if the council desires to allow tents for the full 240 days, that is an amendment to the building code, and we would simply remove the proposed restriction.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, the one scenario we're concerned about is the idea that your tent permit is slightly shorter than your outdoor cafe. That could be a challenge.
Right. Okay. What else? Anybody out there? Okay, we'll continue.
That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Is there a second reading?
Got a manager's report?
I do not have a manager's report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
How about an attorney report?
I do have an attorney's report, Mayor. Only 4 items, though, tonight. The first is an ordinance vacating a certain portion of a public right-of-way located at 6,000 through 6014 Fairview Avenue. An ordinance rezoning certain property located at 6,000 6014 Fairview Avenue. An ordinance authorizing a special use for 1,000 through 1,010 75th Street to promote a personal vehicle repair and maintenance business. And an ordinance amending outdoor dining provisions. That is all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 11 on our agenda tonight, council member reports, an opportunity for our council members to report out on goings-on in the community or other organizations they're working with or part of. We'll start with Rich.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Leslie.
I just want to wish everyone a happy start to Women's History Month. I long for the day when we don't have to have months dedicated to historically marginalized groups, and we celebrate them all the time. But in the meantime, I hope everybody has a happy start to Women's History Month. We have a long history of wonderful women in this village, from the late Betty Cheever to my colleagues up here, to many elected officials and community leaders. So let's all celebrate the contributions of women to the village. And selfishly, today is my husband Jason's 40th birthday. So for everybody watching, which is probably him and like 5 other people, happy 40th birthday. That's all, Mayor.
Happy birthday, Jason. Happy birthday. Paul.
Happy birthday, Jason. No report.
Danny.
Happy birthday, Jason. No report.
Chris.
Jason, happy birthday. No report, man.
Greg.
Welcome to the 40 Club, man. Happy birthday. No report.
I have no additional report tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all and good night.